Richard, thanks for joining me. Look, we are first day SFF 2022. We are about, I think, 3-4 hours in. The themes for this year are viable, responsible, inclusive. So viable for viable business models, responsible to balance out corporate responsibility versus corporate profits, and then inclusive to create business models that are inclusive for the underbanked or unbanked ones. We've got 850 speakers, we've got 450 plus exhibitors, and we've got, I think, 40,000 plus executive attendees. What are you most excited about FinTech 22?
So thanks, Julie. It is an outstanding event. Looking around here, FinTech Singapore 2022, the buzz, the electric in the air is just outstanding. What I'm really excited about is to see the FinTechs alongside some of the traditional banks and the integration, some of the innovation that's going to come out of today's events and the discussions. That's really going to be exciting. I want to learn about some of the digital innovations that they're going to come forward. The discussions today, where they're heading, the market directions, all going to be defined and set through some of the sessions that we have today. The ability to take that and deliver to the market is just going to be really exciting.
One kind of trend that we've seen over the last few years is that every business, specifically the finance sector, is moving into becoming tech businesses. And so you've got on the one hand side the traditional banks, on the other hand you've got the FinTechs coming into that. So how is this transition and this dynamic playing out between these two camps?
Yeah, so if you look at some of the traditional banks, they are making a deliberate transition into a technology company, and they really need to. That's been a path which they've been going down for a number of years. The FinTechs are already there. They started out typically as a focus being cloud ready and cloud native, producing applications that are digitally aware and ready for the market. The traditional banks have done that transformation, and whether you have come from that environment or from a FinTech, they've spent significant amount of time in developing and cultivating a digital front end, almost down to the stage where, if you can like to think of it, it's a digital branch on your handphone, right? So the amount of effort that's gone into that. And me personally, I was trying to think of the last time that I actually went into a physical branch, right? I'm totally dependent on my handphone, and how I do my banking now is through the digital channel. However, that comes with some certain challenges. The digital channel is now generating huge amounts of data. Everyone has been directed to it, and the FinTechs and traditional banks are now having to manage an explosion in the adoption and use of that. That also means that they have to secure it, manage it, and make sure that the information that they gather about a customer is securely protected as well.
It's a good point that you mentioned, and when we look at these two camps of innovation and transformation, and you see the traditional banks, which obviously finance highly regulated industry, so usually a more conservative approach is probably governance first and then innovation, and then you have got the FinTechs, obviously all out, as you say, cloud native, so it's probably innovation first and then governance and security second. So if you're starting this journey on these two extremes, where do we meet? Do we meet in the middle? Do we meet more towards innovation, more towards the governance, security side?
So it has to be a balance of both. You definitely have the government regulations that you have to meet, and that has to be forefront and paramount to a lot of the front-end digitalization that the banks are going through. But yes, you have to be innovative, you have to be fast to the market, you need to bring through new digital services that are going to thrill and excite customers. This is what we're experiencing here today with the merging of FinTechs and traditional banks. But yes, it has to be a combination of the two. You can't do one without the other. And this is where I think this marriage of the two and what we're seeing today is going to be outstanding. The use of the cloud is here. Everyone has adopted it. It used to be, should I go to the cloud? And then it was a question of how fast can I get to the cloud? Now it's what can I do with it? Is these discussions around here and the innovation that's coming out of it. So no, it's exciting to see these companies that have gone through this transformation and become technology companies.
Thank you. I want to drill into this, what can we do with the cloud a little bit later, and because obviously you're working with finance organizations around the world. But just before we go into this, we're approaching the end of 2022, which means we are 20 odd years into the 21st century. 20 odd years into the start of the internet. We're 15 years into mobility, and you mentioned already, everything is on your handheld now. Cloud has been around for over a decade now. The challenges that we're facing today, or the business facing today, is very different to the business back then in the end of the 20th century. So what does the transformation, also the application need to really be ready for a 21st century service and 21st century digital business?
Yeah, so the digital front end has become paramount in delivering the service, as we can all know and attend to. One of the things which we are struggling with today is that the SLAs which the Gen X and Gen Y of today are demanding from our application are so high. There's some studies which talk about a 1 second decrease in latency translates to a 7% decrease or loss of customers and customer sat. And that's huge. And so we really need to focus on performance, managing the application in terms of SLA and delighting our customers. However, we also need to manage cost. We need to look at how do we balance that in delivering back to the business and keeping our customers happy by meeting our SLAs, but keeping our bosses happy by providing a cost-efficient infrastructure at the back end. Now, we already know that adoption of the cloud has led to a massive increase in the amount of data that's being generated. What we can do is we can take AI and ML models, we can use that to assess and understand the application, measure its performance, and then provide recommendations back to the business around sizing, placement, and scaling that can also achieve all of those outcomes. I can ensure that my application meets performance SLAs, delighting my customers. I can then also minimize cost in the back end by reducing some of the impact that I have and keeping my boss happy at the same time as well.
You were saying 7% in the finance industry can mean a lot of money, and it can mean a lot of customers and a lot of brand equity as well. And as we know in the finance sector, it's all about trust as well. You mentioned about what we can do in the cloud. It's not actually more, do we need to go into the cloud? It's more really how can we optimize the value that we're generating from the cloud, and what kind of architecture. So you're a distinguished engineer, and I know it's a very selected group within IBM. So working with financial organizations around the world, what are some of the best practices or some of the trends that you're seeing where really, an organization is really driving value, not just looking at the cost, but really driving value out of cloud investments?
So again, it comes down to some of the focus that our customers have. We talked a little bit about the AI and ML and recommendation that it can come, and the outcomes could be SLA, costing. We'll talk about carbon footprint in a minute. But to make use of those recommendations, I've got to be able to implement them. Okay, and so the marriage of a digital front end and the cloud has a benefit. It has a cost in terms of data, but it also has a benefit in that I can automate those actions and remediation tasks in real time. Okay, so I can adjust and scale my application to meet the ongoing demands of the application. For the FinTechs and the cloud natives, that's easy. They'll turn it on, they'll take the AI recommendations, and they'll execute on them. The more traditional banks, especially when I've got a larger digital back end, that's sometimes not quite so automatic. I've got a little bit more process, bit more restrictions to go through in allowing the automation to go through and make some of these changes. That's mindset's changing, and it is growing, and two worlds are slowly becoming closer together. But the ability for AI to implement and make some of its recommendations is where we're heading to today.
So I saw an equation recently, which I think was quite good, which said innovation is data plus code. So you're providing the code, but you still need the data from within the organization. So,
Yes.
and we always, from our research perspective, every time we talk to an organization, getting trustworthy data is always the biggest challenge. You mentioned we're capturing more and more data, but how trustworthy is this data really like feeding into the AI models to first of all give the appropriate recommendations, but also potentially the automated actions?
Yeah, and so this again, there's the two different mindsets: the ability to understand the AI and trust the recommendations, or do I vet it and do I have an operator come through and check and sign off a part of this? Again, it's an adoption mindset. The longer you leave the AI learning, the more accurate your recommendations will become, and the more trustworthy the outcome or the results will be. This is one of those things where we're right on the cusp. A lot of customers are adopting AI, bringing it into the systems, and yes, they are now starting to trust and rely on some of the recommendations that are coming out of the AI. So that's going to be part of the evolution for the next 12 to 18 months.
Can I ask you one question? When we're in Singapore, obviously here, and Asia specifically is a very diverse region. Like, how is the adoption of AI, FinOps, or IOps in the fintech space or in the finance space compared to maybe other markets like North America, Europe?
So I think that's it depends on the market, and it depends on the region. But the adoption of AI here seems to be faster. The fintechs and the traditional, I'll call them new technology companies, are actually adopting AI and experimenting with it. They're in the experimental phase. They've got a bunch of data scientists that are building models, and they're right on the cusp of implementing some of these models. North America is still in the stage where they may be experimenting with it. I think here in Asia Pacific, we're actually getting to the stage where these models, we're starting to see the benefit of some of these models in some of the recommendations. But yes, you mentioned FinOps, and that's really what we're talking about here. The ability to take financial decisions within the operations teams to reduce cost back to the company as well. But the outcome of that is not only just cost, it is meeting performance SLAs, but also the ability to have an effect on the carbon footprint. And so FinOps delivers back to the organization a number of different things. And I think people kind of forget about the carbon footprint benefit that FinOps brings to them. In terms of, when I talk to my son, who's a teenager, global corporate responsibility in terms of give back and this carbon footprint means a lot. It's going to be one of the driving factors, I think, in decision making on where do I go for a service. If I'm going to pick a service which is carbon neutral over one which is not, my son would pick a carbon neutral one.
Actually, the sustainability or ESG discussion obviously is a big theme for SFF 2022, and it has been over the last few years as well. And it comes pretty much up in every discussion. And it's the one is obviously the cost itself. There's a regulated pressure which is building over years. And MAS as the regulator here in Singapore has been very proactive in working with the industry, but we're also seeing it from a brand value, actually from a customer. As you said, like your son would probably make a decision on who they want to bank with, depending on maybe their sustainability responsibility, but also employees as well, talent that you can acquire. So, how much has this taken dominance in discussions that you have with clients, where we move away from just the cost aspect or just the optimization aspect to actually what does it mean for the carbon footprint?
Yeah, so I think that is one of the key changes that we're going to see, and we have been experiencing that. When I talk about FinOps to a lot of customers, the carbon footprint is a side discussion. It is now becoming more and more prevalent. I'm starting to bring it in earlier into the conversation to say, hey, you do realize that you can also alongside of costs and performance assurance, I'm going to be, dramatically affecting the carbon footprint. That conversation now is starting to resonate, and customers are taking more notice of it because it will mean a lot more to the generations that are coming. And yeah, I think there will be purchasing decisions, loyalty decisions that will be based on carbon footprint and corporate responsibility going forward. I really do.
We were in a roundtable discussion this morning, and one topic that came up was that in the past it was all about profit and shareholder value. Mm-hmm. That going forward, the corporate mindset needs to move to the 3 Ps, which is planet, people, and then profit number 3. Do you think that really the business focus will change, or does it actually need to be a compromise between planet and profit, or people and profit?
No, I think there will always be some component of profit in here. There always will be. You're going to need to make sure that you are a profitable business. But in doing so, if you ignore the carbon and you ignore footprint and corporate responsibility, you won't make a profit in the long run anyway. So it's going to have to definitely be a juggling act. But no, it's becoming more and more to the forefront. I don't think it will be something that as a purchasing decision in the short term, but it's definitely having an impact, and I want to see where this goes.
Okay. Richard, we are almost out of time, but I can't let you go without one final question. You're a distinguished engineer, and as we said, it's a very selected group, and you're working with the innovation labs for IBM around the world. If we meet again in 12 months' time at SFF 2023, what do you think we will see or talk about that maybe is not on the radar today?
Yeah, now you told me you were going to ask that question, and I did a lot of thinking last night. I said it, and I thought, well, what is it that's going to come out that we haven't really heard too much about? My personal view is I think that everyone is underestimating the impact that 5G is going to have. We talked earlier on about having a digital branch in your hand. Your hand phone becomes your primary engagement tool with customers. The introduction of 5G is going to change that. We're going to have faster bandwidth. We're going to have more services within reach of us. I think we're going to hear more about augmented reality. I think we're going to hear more about in different engagement models and how we interact with our customers. 5G is going to play a huge impact on that, and I think we'll see the digital channel and the way that we engage our customers completely reinvented, from a digital handphone to some digital reality or digital augmentation.
So you can basically visit your branch virtually rather than having to actually walk into this. Look, I think we're unfortunately out of time, but I really appreciate your time on thought. There's obviously more sessions coming up during SFF over the next few days here at the IBM stand. But thank you very much for the chat.
Really, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks.